Well, in Design Your Life, whether it was flipping burgers or repairing plumbing, you had a vision for your life. And Design Your Life, so important. For franchisees, it's a great way to get that vision. How important is that today at Neighborly and your brands?
Well, it's very important. Design your life, because we want to make sure that our owners are looking at the big picture, right? It's not just about the actual franchise business and making a profit and earning money, but it's putting into perspective with your overall life and your needs, right? Looking at family, health, right? We're trying to make sure that people design their life and structure their life in such a way that our business opportunity allows them to achieve all of those different facets within life.
Welcome to the Franchise Hot Seat Podcast, where we talk about all things franchising. Now, here's your host, Dr. John P. Hayes.
My guest today is Brian Woods, and he is with Neighborly. He's the Vice President of Franchise Development. Neighborly has 32 home service brands and more than 5,500 franchise locations in 9 countries. And I love it that Brian is responsible for the development of 7 franchise brands. 6 of them I'm very familiar with, because in the early days, when it was not Neighborly, but the Dwyer Group, 6 of those 7 brands that he's responsible for were all in place under the leadership of Don Dwyer, who was one of the most inspiring and visionary franchisors who we've ever had in the lifetime of franchising. And of course, nobody believed most of what Don was visioning, because who would say, here I am in Little Waco, Texas, with Rainbow International Carpet Cleaning, and one day we're going to be known worldwide. We're going to be known by a gigantic company. Who would have? Yeah, Don, sure. Maybe that'll happen. And God bless him, he died way too soon and didn't have the opportunity to see that exactly what he said is what happened. Beyond what he said is what happened. So, and here's Brian Woods. He's the key driver in the strategic direction of the brands in terms of their growth and their market expansion. We want to talk to him about that. He's got a passion for changing people's lives, and so did Don Dwyer. That's what it was all about all the time. He changed my life and so many lives of other people. A great inspiration. And Brian wants to do this by providing them with business ownership that will create financial flexibility and the legacy that they deserve. And I think that's wonderful, Brian. I applaud you for jumping onto the Neighborly bandwagon. They're very fortunate to have you in that position. And I can tell you, Don Dwyer is smiling down upon you every day, as I know he's smiling down upon me and everybody else who is involved with his company. So, Brian, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Brian, how did you discover franchising? Nobody, except with some exceptions like a Ray Titus, whose father was the founder of Minuteman Press, and probably some exceptions like the Dwyer kids, whose father was Don Dwyer. Otherwise, nobody grows up and says, I'm going to be in franchising someday. That doesn't happen. When I first discovered franchising, I hardly knew how to spell the word, and I had no business background. And yet once I caught on to it, wrote a book about it, it changed my life. And I'm sure it's changed your life. How did that happen, Brian?
Yes, I actually have a very unorthodox way into landing into franchising. When I graduated from college, I started on Wall Street. I was in finance. So I started my first, maybe 8 to 10 years in finance, love numbers, love, analytical projects. And then I went back to grad school to get a degree in strategy. So I actually transitioned out of finance and went into corporate strategy, was worked for AT&T for a few years. I actually stumbled into franchising like many people do on the analytical side, on the strategy side. I was hired by G6 Hospitality, the parent company of Motel 6 and Studio 6 franchising, as a corporate strategy leader. And I was responsible for driving the growth of the Motel 6 and Studio 6 franchise brands. So started on the analytical side, driving those markets, and then got a little bit of exposure to the actual franchise development side, working with some of our key investors on multi-unit development, and started to feel like this was really the place I wanted to be. So transition out of that corporate role into a pure franchise development role, where I was responsible for developing the Motel 6 and Studio 6 franchise in the western part of the United States. And I did that for a few years before coming over to Neighborly, where I had the opportunity to now drive the franchise concepts in our repair group. So it's been 2 years. Out of all my career, the last 8 to 9 have been on the franchising side, and I love it.
Yeah. So another thing is, you don't sound like your career doesn't make you sound like you're on a track to get into franchise development, to essentially award franchise opportunities to people throughout the world. David Sandler, I wrote his book, You Can't Teach a Kid to Ride a Bike at a Seminar. David Sandler and Don Dwyer were colleagues in SMI, based in Waco, years and years and years ago. Both of them branched off to build their own franchise companies. Sandler built Sandler Training, which is a fabulous franchise company on its own. And so they knew each other. And David was always saying that no mother ever leans into the crib at nighttime, putting the baby to sleep, and says, "Honey, Mama wants you to grow up to be a salesperson." That's not for anybody. Well, if I were doing it again, I think I might go the route of franchise development. You guys make all the money. So I think that's the place to be. But I'm very happy with what I've done and where I'm teaching at Palm Beach Atlantic University and the opportunity to teach franchising. So the way we come to franchising is always interesting. And it hits you slowly. It did me. It had to sink in because I didn't know what this was all about. And then I realized, wow, I can make a whole lot more money, take care of my family better, actually have time to take a vacation if I got into franchising and started working with franchisors and franchisees. And that's the path that it took. Now, along the way, we hear criticisms about franchising. For example, you're just buying into somebody else's dream. That one always gets me. There's a guy on social media. I won't buy a franchise. I'm not going to buy into somebody else's dream. Buddy, you couldn't have done better than to buy into Don Dwyer's dream or any other of these major franchisors. So that's a criticism. Or you're just buying yourself a job, whether it's using a van or a truck, or you're in a shop like mailboxes, et cetera. They used to criticize that concept that you're just sitting in a store Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. It's just a job. It's not paying you any money. Subway, not paying you any real money. So we heard those criticisms. And of course, today we're in an environment where the government is looking at revamping franchise regulations and probably adding to those franchise regulations. So there's a lot of criticism. I didn't know all about it at the time that I got involved because I saw the positives of franchising, and I still do every day. And I don't think, I've been in this since 1979. I don't think we've ever had a period of growth like what we're in right now. Are you getting lots more attention from people and interest from people today?
Absolutely. It really took a huge jump right around 2020 when you saw the pandemic, when things started to slow down. There was a lot of, layoffs and the economy was slowing down. It really gave people an opportunity to really, re-gauge what they want to do, like what's their purpose. And to your point earlier, the criticism can be so far from the truth. The dream that Dwyer, that franchising has, is to allow people to achieve their dream, right? To give them the opportunity to invest in freedom, flexibility, and a motivation to drive their own individual goals and objectives, not ours, right? You're not buying into a job. You're buying into your future and your flexibility.
Yeah.
So the fact that we had so many, layoffs, it gave people opportunity to really reevaluate what they wanted to do with their lives. So we've seen a huge growth from that when people wanted to, kind of take control of their lives, right? And to your point, like you said, being in franchising, we're able to create that flexibility within your personal life. And people are seeing that, and then, earlier in our conversation, they are now being able to create that financial legacy and family legacy, right? People are passing this on to their children. So there's purpose there. So the fact that, the recession and slowdown is, bad from a economy perspective, the franchising world seems to, heat up with more people realizing that they now have an opportunity to go after their dreams.
Yeah, that's so important, Brian, that people want to be in charge of their lives. In your analytical, strategic background, is there another methodology other than franchising? And I wrote the book, Network Marketing for Dummies with Zig Ziglar, so I know all about that. What's another business methodology that gives you the opportunity that franchising gives to an individual?
Absolutely no other option than franchising, because we talk about this with our candidates looking at, neighborly brands. You can go out and you can create your own business on your own. But, the fact that the franchising model has a proven successful system that you can actually buy into and pretty much just use as a blueprint for your own success, there's no other structure or methodology out there that gives someone that chance to ramp up that fast, right? Because you're going to spend a lot of blood, sweat, tears, money trying to learn and figure out what works and what doesn't work. You don't have that, mentorship and leadership that you will get from the franchisors to guide you. So the fact that franchise has perfected this structure and this methodology, bar none, there is no other real option out there.
Yeah. Also, early on in her career, Don's daughter, Dina Dwyer Owens, who was president for a long time at the Dwyer Group and who was chair of the International Franchise Association, she developed a program that her father created, at least parts of it, and then others influenced what Dina did, called Design Your Life, which she still teaches today. I hope to have her on campus soon to teach it to my students. Every franchisee would get to go through the Design Your Life program. Mm-hmm. And that was a gift, because if you're thinking in terms of, okay, I'm buying myself a job, which was the wrong way to approach it, but some people did, or people were telling you that's all you're doing, flipping burgers, it's just a job. Mm-hmm. Well, in Design Your Life, whether it was flipping burgers or repairing plumbing, you had a vision for your life. Yeah. And Design Your Life, so important for franchisees. It's a great way to get that vision. How important is that today at Neighborly and your brands?
Well, it's very important, Design Your Life, because we want to make sure that our owners are looking at the big picture, right? It's not just about the actual franchise business and making a profit and earning money, but it's putting it in perspective with your overall life and your needs, right? Looking at family, health, right? We're trying to make sure that people design their life and structure their life in such a way that our business opportunity allows them to achieve all of those different facets within life. So it just gives more robustness to the overall business structure that we have that really allows you to tap into that personal motivation. One of the things we always hear is that, working in corporate America or in having a standard job is that they don't have the flexibility to take off and see their kids play baseball and take those family vacations. And that's really key to the overall life and happiness of our owners. So by creating a structure that allows them to focus on that more and get that out of the business where they have the freedom to accomplish that is really critical to us. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of candidates actually choose us, because we just don't make it about the business. We really want them to ensure that they are looking at their total life as a whole to make sure this business gets them there.
Yeah. The disc profile, let's talk about that for a moment. Don Dwyer, founder of this conglomerate originally of franchise brands, now known as Neighborly, Don loved the disc profile and understood that if you're not doing what you're capable of doing, qualified to do, not only love or have a passion for it, you have to have some talent. And all of us do in one way or another, and it's defined by DISC, the dominant, the influencer, the steady, the competent personality. And we all have distinct personalities. And Don was one of the visionaries, again, to use the DISC in franchising and to identify people who, well, here's why you shouldn't be a Mr. Rooter franchisee, but here's why you would be better off becoming an AirServe franchisee, or maybe none of Don's brands at the time, maybe something else, maybe Sandler Training, for example. DISC is a great indicator of what you're likely to do well and how you're likely to handle business operations. You use DISC, and how do you feel about profiling people?
Oh, we love it. And we use the DISC profile in our actual franchise development journey and process as well, because we really want to understand a person's personality. And to your point, understand their strengths, their opportunities, the style that they, take information in. How do they make decisions, right? So there are certain brands we have where we see that the dominant, right, personality tends to be fairly successful in, right? But then there's also brands where, if you're a C, more cautious, more steady in regards to how you take in information, how you make decisions, have actually been pretty beneficial for other brands. So this allows not just the franchise development team, but also the brand and the operations team to understand the characteristics of each candidate that we have, to see that, hey, here's their strengths and here's how we can leverage them, right? So we don't make it like a elimination factor where you have to be a D to be an AirServe or something like that. Like, we're not that stringent, but we do like to use it as a guide and use some of the insights that we get from the profile to ensure that we position them in a way to be successful in any brand they go into.
So a very good example. Mr. Rooter was one of the businesses that Don developed firsthand. I was involved in the business with him, at least from the marketing and the promotional point of view. I provided a lot of those services to Dwyer companies, had the opportunity to speak at a lot of conferences, and could talk about why Dwyer brands work the way that they worked. So here is a Mr. Rooter. And plumbers are generally generational. My father was a plumber. My grandfather was a plumber. I inherited the business. But generally, the plumbers were not making a killing, even though they're, when you call them to your home and you got to pay $300 to get something changed out on your toilet, you feel like these guys are making a lot of money. They weren't. They were generally a guy on a truck. And a guy on a truck isn't going to build a legacy. He's not going to build a business. And they were generally technicians. That's who like to buy franchises. And those are going to be probably the S and the C DISC on the DISC profile. They can be very competent, but cautious. They like to be team players. They don't like to be leaders. They don't want to be out front. Well, when Don would speak to a plumber who would say, well, I get $600 for changing out a hot water tank, $700, something like that. And Don said, well, you're losing money. Well, what do you mean I'm losing money? That's the price. That's the competitive price. And Don would say, no, the right price is $1,000 to change that out. Plumber would say, I would never be able to get that. And Don would then show them why they could get that, why the brand of Mr. Rooter could get that $1,000, because Mr. Rooter wasn't just a plumbing company. There were other plumbing franchises out there. Mr. Rooter, because of the way Don approached the philosophy of running a business as a plumber, was a step above, and you're going to pay a step above. The guy shows up at the door. He's nicely dressed. He knows how to speak to you. And this may not be the actual plumber in some cases, but usually it is. And before he comes into your house, Mr. Rooter was one of the first to put the booties over their shoes, not to track in mud or to dirty the floor. It really, was it that essential to put booties on? Not really. But again, it set them apart. And then the way they did their marketing, following Dwyer strategies that he created with Rainbow International, his flagship brand, This Mr. Reuter was set apart. And Mr. Reuter, knowing how to generate leads, could get $1,000 to repair a hot water tank when they used to get $650 or $700 to repair a hot water tank. So Mr. Reuter became the high-priced plumber, but those franchisees really benefited from. Now they were really making money. And a guy who was a plumber, like his father, like his grandfather, who worked 7 days a week, now he wasn't working 7 days a week anymore. He was working 5 days a week, and maybe not that often. And maybe he wasn't on the truck anymore. Maybe his expertise was actually in talking on the phone to customers or training his employees and actually building a team, which through Design Your Life and other training, the Dwyer support team taught them how to do. Mm-hmm. So how does a brand change your life, and similar to what I'm speaking about?
Yeah, well, I think that's really critical, because one of the things that Neighborly has determined in our analytics is that, approximately 75% of customers make their final purchasing decision based off experience, right? Which means only 25% are only looking at just pure cost. So we are trying to get our owners to market and focus on that 75% of people looking to make a decision based off experience. Because at Neighborly, we are offering a premium service, an amazing premium service that we ensure will be worth the added price that you may see versus someone maybe changing that hot water heater out for $600, right? From the time that they make the phone call to schedule the appointment, to your point, having them there dressed nicely with the booties, and then also having the expertise to walk you through the different options of the solution of your problem, getting it done in a timely fashion, and then following back up to make sure that you don't have any other questions or any kind of problems with the service. So that experience from the very beginning to the very end is why many people choose to pay a premium price for that great service. Mm-hmm. And that's what we try to do. We try to make sure that our owners focus on that 75% and give them a reason to charge a higher price because it's worth it.
Mm-hmm. Focusing on the 75%. Some personalities aren't capable of doing that. They wouldn't understand that. The I would be lost with that. Even the disc, even the D in the disc would ignore some of that philosophy. But you've got to be multi-talented in order to do everything you just explained when a Mr. Reuter arrives at a home or even talks on the phone, focusing on that 75%. Mm-hmm. You've got to be able to motivate the homeowner. You've got to be able to distinguish between Mr. Reuter and any other plumbing company. You got to dress up a little bit. The average plumber probably doesn't think about dressing up. He's got his toolkit. He's ready to go to work. But before you go to work, there's a relationship that has to be built. D's and I's are good at doing that. S's and C's aren't so good at doing that. But maybe you don't want a D working on your toilet because the D's don't have the patience for doing that. Whereas the S and the C, they're not only going to work on it, and they've got patience, they're going to get it right no matter what's involved. But there's two personalities there that we're talking about. And so this is why plumbers and electricians, even accountants and lawyers, they become one-person shops. And they don't make all that much money, and they probably work 7 days a week. But your system at Mr. Reuter, Mr. Electric, and so on, 32 brands, your systems teach them how to approach business in a very savvy manner where they not only make money, they please their customers, and they have a life.
Yeah. And they actually incorporate the diversity of a team, because to your point, right, the D won't have the patience to go fix something, but the S's and C's will. That's why you need a little bit of both, right? You need someone to set the goals, kind of build out the strategy, and then you need people to execute, right? So you need a little bit of all personalities and all talents and skills to be successful. There's tons of numbers and studies that show that the more diverse your team is, and that's all diversity, right? From skills to background, et cetera, that business is typically going to perform at a higher rate. So I really encourage businesses to continue to implore and recruit and hire different, people with different skill sets, because that actually brings out a higher performance in your overall company.
And that's the beauty of franchising, the systems that exist, because unless you're very entrepreneurial and you have a lot of money to invest and time to do it, and the knowledge that you're probably going to fail, because most do in that situation, franchising delivers systems to people that show them what to do, when to do it, how much of it to do, when to do it again. And that keeps businesses from failing. A lot of people just don't understand that. Do you encounter that as well?
We encounter it all the time. And I actually have presented to some candidates on some numbers, right? I love what I do. I love connecting with people, but there's still a joy for some of the numbers and analytics that, pretty much justifies and confirms some of the things we say. And there was a study out there that was done that showed that only 50% of businesses that are not franchised actually are still in business after 5 years. But when you look at a franchise business, 85% of those businesses are still in business after 5 years. And why is that, right? It's the fact that those franchise businesses have really taken advantage of that proven successful system and model to ensure that they increase their probabilities of success for the long term. So because of that, we are always letting our candidates know that there is a true tangible benefit and upside to being in the franchise model versus going out there and starting a business yourself.
Yeah. So you mentioned numbers, and that brings me back years ago, 20 years ago, to one of Dwyer's franchisees, a multi-brand franchisee out in Michigan. He was, no matter which brand he had, he would go to the top. Number one franchisee. I don't know if he's still in the system or not. He was the funniest guy, the most likable guy. And I befriended him and was with him when he arrived at a convention one year. And I had to step back because the hordes of franchisees who were at a family reunion, a Dwyer family reunion, everybody wanted to talk to this franchisee. How do you do it? He looked like any other franchisee. He wasn't anything remarkable about his appearance. His English wasn't always the best. And they would say, how are you doing this? How do you rise to number one in multiple concepts? And he would say, numbers. And, the D doesn't know numbers and the I doesn't know numbers or really care all that much about numbers for the most part. And this was a very steady personality and a C personality. And he would say, then he would ask the visiting franchisee, the questioning franchisee, how many calls do you get on average every week? I don't know. How many of those calls do you convert to sales every week? I don't know. There's your problem, he would say. You don't know your numbers. And he had a set of numbers that you needed to know. And then he would say to me, the funny thing is these guys think I'm working really hard every day. I'm not. I go into the office to get the mail, to take the checks to the bank. Now, we don't do that anymore for the most part, but that's how it was back then. And then he said, I get home in time to have lunch with my wife. That's my number one priority every day. And then he said, I love Lucy reruns. So I might go back to the office after lunch, but I got to get home in time to watch I Love Lucy. I can't tell people that because they think I'm crazy or, somebody else is running the business for me. It's all about the numbers. It's not about doing the work of the business. That's for the technician, not for the franchisee.
Yep. And we always say this, and it's a common, saying in franchising, right? We want you to work on the business and not in the business, right? Because that's the proper model. You want to be able to identify and hire the right people to do the work. And you will continue to see that performance in the numbers when you put the right people in the right seat. So that owner has made it pretty much like a turnkey process for him, as every time he would add a brand, he had the ability to find out who was the right leader to be able to drive the performance in that brand. And he just continued to your point, sit back, watch his I Love Lucy reruns, go to the mailbox, get his checks, while the business continued to run for itself, or run by for itself, and by those leaders. So we've seen that time and time again, because the more processes you have in place with the right people, that also increases the value of the entire business, because there's more processes and proven systems in place. So there's a lot of great things in that, and that multi-unit owner and multi-brand owner was able to perfect that.
Yeah. So I'm going to turn up the heat a little bit, Brian. So some people are likely to say, you probably hear this, you guys are too big. 32 brands, 5,500 locations. Come on. I'm going to pay you a lot of money, and I need your attention on my little business in Canton, Ohio. I don't think you're going to be all that interested in me and how I perform. I think you're all about building brands, selling franchises, and making a lot of money for Neighborly so you can sell the business again. Now, maybe they don't speak to you quite that harshly, Brian, but that's what they want to say. What do you say?
I say that can't be far from the truth. I mean, we are getting bigger, yes, but our leadership, right? Mike Bidwell, Mary Thompson, our CEO and our COO in particular, they owned franchises for Neighborly in the past. That's where they actually started, right? So we have leaders that understand what it looks like and what it feels like to be a business owner. So our decisions from a strategy perspective is always going to have that small business owner in mind. We have a really great balance of being able to provide that support and that structure to a small business owner while still continuing to accommodate the large scale that we have been able to build over the years. So it's a tough balance, but I think we have the right leadership in place to make sure we focus on that small business owner, give them the support and the guidance they need. And at the same time, that will continue to drive the overall business, and everyone is happy because the results will speak for themselves if we continue to keep the small business owner up front.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned Mike Bidwell as CEO. Here's how far I go back. Mike was a franchisee of Rainbow in Arizona. He was coming to the home office in Waco to sell his franchise. He had it. He and his partner were going to throw in the towel. What does Dwyer do? Dwyer says, I want you to be president of Rainbow International. Move your family to Waco.
Yeah.
And, I'm still laughing because who's going to do that, Don? I mean, I'd rather drive from Frisco every day to come down to see you than to live in Waco. But I take that back because Waco today is not the Waco of back then. It's quite the place to be. But still, you prefer to be in Frisco, in the Dallas area. It's much more cosmopolitan. Nothing wrong with life in Waco. You could get yourself 10 acres, a nice farmhouse, not have to deal with neighbors, et cetera, if you like that kind of thing. But a lot of people didn't want to go there. And of course, it's the home of Baylor University, and that's terrific as well for the community. Well, Bidwell makes that move years and years ago, comes to Waco, Texas, and he's still there. Yeah. And now look at him. He's the leader of this huge Neighborly business. And I'm grateful that I still can reach him every so often. I brought him to the university to speak to one of our groups, and he did a masterful job. But listen, Brian, I don't think my little place in Canton, Ohio, I'm going to be a Mr. Whatever franchise. I doubt Mike Bidwell's ever even going to know my name, come to visit me, or really give a hoot about whether John Hayes succeeds or not as a franchisee. Yeah, I know he was a franchisee way back then, but the guy is way above all that now, financially and otherwise. He's one of the top dogs in franchising. So I'm not sure I buy into the leadership cares about me. What do you say?
Well, Mike does a great job of being accessible to all of franchise owners. He is always attending all of our key conferences. He speaks at the conferences. He also takes time to have lunch with just some of our regular franchise owners, just to get a feel for how the business is going for them and are they getting support that they need. He has really done a great job of connecting with the franchise owner network within Neighborly, so that people feel really comfortable with him as a leader, but also just feel comfortable going up to him and asking, how's he doing? What's going on with the brands? What can we be doing differently? So I really appreciate a leader that's that accessible and really listens to our owners.
Yeah.
And, a lot of times he can empathize, because it's nothing like having someone who can listen to something that you're going through and say, I was in that same position before when I was an owner.
Agree.
That just provides more credibility to our leaders to do that. So I really applaud Mike for having that balance of, managing such a large network, but at the same time being accessible and caring for every single owner that we have.
Yeah, I appreciate what he's doing. Give him a lot of credit. God bless him. He works really hard at building Neighborly. It used to be that back in the day, people would come up to me and say, how can I meet Don Dwyer? Will you introduce me to him? I really want to know Don Dwyer. Today, I get as many questions like that from people about Mike Bidwell. And of course, generally, it's an emerging franchise company that wants to become part of the Neighborly franchise system. And, I know Mike has his own ways of finding out businesses that they want to acquire. And I know he's busy doing that. So most of these people do not get that opportunity. But every so often, I'll send somebody his way because I think he ought to know them. And I think he's doing a terrific job. And hopefully he'll continue for many more years in that role. So let's go to where I've turned up the heat a little bit on you, Brian. The people who say, Brian, you're just going to sell me a franchise. You got 32 of them, and you're going to make sure that I don't get away. Whether I should be a Mr. Something franchisee or not, Mosquito franchisee or not, the Handyman franchisee or not, you're going to make sure you find me a place among the 32. Even if I'm not, I'm not the profile to become a franchisee. What are you going to do in that case, Brian?
We probably won't approve them, right? Because honestly, our process is a mutual evaluation process. So just as important as it is for a candidate to evaluate and look at what Neighborly provides them, Neighborly is also doing the due diligence and investigating and researching every single candidate, because we're really big on our code of values and our culture. So we want to make sure that anyone we bring in aligns with our overall culture. When we do that, that makes sure that our brands continue at a level of excellence that they've always been at by continuing to bring in the right kind of people. So if there's a brand and there's a candidate that doesn't seem to fit, now there could be some, maybe some additional personality differences that may make it, more plausible for them to go to another brand. But if underlying code of values and culture is not there, they will more than likely not be approved as a franchisee for us.
When we talk in franchising about code of values and culture, we think of Chick-fil-A.
Yes.
Closed on Sunday, and yet franchisees are making far more money than McDonald's or Burger King or KFC franchisees. Closed on Sunday. Mm-hmm. That's the culture.
Yeah.
That's the code of values. How can that be? Is it culture that sets you apart?
That's what really sets us apart, right? We live our code of values, right? And you spoke about Dina, and we call it living rich, right? RICH. R is respect, I is integrity, C is customer focus, and H is having fun in the process. That's our summary of all of our code of values. And we live them every day. I've worked for other companies where, the mission or the code of values were either on the website or someone on the wall, and you don't really get a chance to refer to them often. But at Neighborly, right, we start every morning with every meeting reciting our code of values, so that ensures us that we are going to operate every single day under our code of values. And one of them is speak honestly and with purpose, right? And we continue to do just that. So we use that as a barometer, right, in order to find the right people to bring into our brands, because we want to make sure that our code of values align with their code of values, honesty, integrity, etc., because that makes a perfect marriage for both sides.
As a consequence of Chick-fil-A's culture, they get 90,000 plus people a year who want to become a franchisee of Chick-fil-A.
Yes.
They're going to select less than 100 of them. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Having 90,000 leads, most of them pretty good, but it'll take maybe 2 to 5 years to get the approval from Chick-fil-A to become a franchisee. Most franchise development people are not in that situation. It's the reverse. They are pressuring that prospect to some extent to make a decision. Brands don't always do due diligence like Chick-fil-A and like Neighborly, but you got to find out, which is why the disc is so critical. Franchisors who don't profile incoming franchisees, don't tell me that's respect. Don't tell me that's culture. Don't tell me that you really care about the future success of your franchisee, because you don't even know who they are if you don't have a basic disc. Or are they capable of doing what you all do in your brand? So that's a beginning. And then many companies would shun the idea. They think it's ridiculous to begin a meeting like you do at Neighborly with going through your code of values. And we did this back in Don's day. We did this back in Dina's time with the company. We might go through the code of values in a given day. I might have had 4 or 5 meetings there where we went through the code of values. They become ingrained. One of the things I loved about that is that you speak respectfully to one another. You may be angry about something. You may be really disappointed what someone did or didn't do. But I can tell you that in my meetings, my relationships, the hours and hours and hours of time that I spent every year in Dwyer companies, I never heard a foul word spoken, even when people were angry. It was always respect. That came first. That does not exist everywhere you go. 4,500 brands, franchise brands in North America. That's not the way it is at most of those places.
Exactly. And one of our code of values is speaking calmly and respectfully without profanity and sarcasm. That is one of our code of values. So we live them every single day. So, whenever we decide to have a smaller meeting, we will do a shortened version. But there's, 12 to 15 code of values we recite around a large meeting to make sure that we all set ourselves in the right mindset to operate above the line, which is another one. So without the culture, without our code of values, right, we aren't the organization that we are now. So to invest and truly live by your mission, vision, purpose, and code of values really sets you apart in the franchising industry.
So in that case where culture is in jeopardy, if I accept this franchise candidate, I know they don't share our culture. How many times is that an issue where you personally face it in your development career that this is not our personality type for a franchisee? This person is not going to be comfortable in our culture. And if I say no to them, or I don't want to approve them as a franchisee, personally, you've got quotas to hit. It's business. You're expected to perform, and you've got a family. You need money as well, and it's not easy to pass up a commission or your payroll. How often does this happen to you? How do you handle that?
It happens more often than you would think, right? Because obviously with the lead flow and the amount of people across all the brands coming in from a lead perspective, there are going to be those times where you're going to have someone where, based off of the conversations, some of the feedback that you receive from other owners, that there is some concern of whether a candidate will be able to fit in our culture and with our existing franchise owners. And to your point, they look good on paper, right? They have the financials, they have the business background, they have all the, other personality traits required to be successful, but the fit isn't there, right? So we always try to make the decision based off what's best for the brand long term. Because short term, that's a deal, that's a commission, right? That's hitting quotas and budgets. But what does that do to the brand long term? So we always try to ensure we have a long term mindset when it comes to making those kinds of decisions. The reason why our process is so robust, because it gives different people in our process an opportunity to meet these candidates, right? So it's not just me, right? Because it just might be my perspective, but if the brand president, our VP of ops, our other franchise development leaders engage with this person, they have a different experience, it might have just been me. So the fact that our process ensures that many people get a chance to meet these candidates, and if it's an overwhelming, reaction to a candidate where it might not be a good fit, we'll typically not accept them.
You have the great advantage of representing Neighborly. It's like the Chick-fil-A scenario where they get, without even advertising, 90,000 plus leads a year to become a franchisee. I don't know what number Neighborly attracts, and I know you're out there. You pay marketing fees to attract people to your brands. You have the comfort as a development person of knowing that, okay, if I can't approve this candidate, maybe because it's a cultural non-fit, I don't have to worry about getting another lead. But a lot of these brands where it's just a brand, emerging company, just getting started, a franchisor who doesn't really have all the talent, not the experience yet, they cling to every lead. And this is why they sell to the wrong people much of the time in those early years. Does that give you comfort knowing, I'm not emerging. We've got reputation and I represent that reputation. Gives you some comfort knowing that if these 3 leads don't work out for me on this deal over the next 30 days, I've got 6 more that are waiting for me.
Well, there's definitely a benefit of being a larger franchisor with a lot of experience, because you're right, there is a consistent lead flow that we get. But, as a franchise development leader, I always say you never have enough leads, right? So you can always have more leads. But, one of the things that maybe the emerging franchisor, faces is the fact that they have bills to pay and they need to get people in the system. But in the long term, that might not be the right decision, because what happens is you bring in the wrong candidates that become disgruntled owners, and now your validation for ongoing franchise development efforts are not going to work. Because when a candidate comes in and they start talking to some of those existing owners who aren't happy, that won't help at all with growth. So that's why you have to really take this as a long-term play, because yes, you can get that owner in now and then come to find out that it's not a good fit. That then poisons the well for future candidates coming in, because they just won't have great validation.
Mm-hmm. So, Brian, what keeps you awake at night, especially in terms of new franchise regulations, where we have unprecedented growth in franchising, more people than ever who want to become franchisees, and yet there are still failures that occur, and the failures get the attention of our political leaders, our people in government, the people at the FTC who oversee franchising, which I think is why we are so successful. America leads the world in franchise development since 1979. We've had specific federal regulations that determine how franchisors must operate. I think that's a great thing. But are you spending any time, is Neighborly spending any time with some worry about what's coming? How's the government going to change our business?
Absolutely. And we read and we're staying abreast of all the different, topics being discussed in Congress, right? There's a lot of regulation coming from an employment perspective, and, just more restrictions on the ability for franchisors to, expand and do more franchising. So we have to continue to lobby and make sure that we are doing our part as a franchisor to ensure that our voice is being heard, right? Working really closely with IFA, who has a lot of, support from the franchising community to have our voice heard, to ensure that we have the most favorable laws and regulations in place that will continue to give us an opportunity to grow. And to your point, sometimes there will be some failures. That's in any business, in any industry, right? There's no 100% success rate anywhere. So we just don't want franchising to get a bad rap because there's just been a few instances where things haven't worked out. But look at the bright side, right? Franchising has always been one of the largest employers, right, in our country when it comes to workforce, right? There's a lot of different advantages of being a franchise. We've made more business owners, successful, right, versus people going into business for themselves. And, we're a country that loves to, have people be free and do what they want in regards to their own business and their future. Franchising gives them that. So the fact that we have so many things going well for us, hopefully, our voice will be heard at the government level to ensure that we keep those in place in our favor.
I hope so. Sometimes the government regulators, they've never been franchisees. They don't understand that franchising drives the American dream,
Yes.
and we don't want them to screw it up.
We do not.
So-
We do not. This is a great thing, right? And the more people truly understand what we do, I think we will see a lot of, favorable decisions being made. But that's the key. Someone has to take the time to truly understand what we're doing and the benefit that we're bringing.
Great. Well, Brian, part of getting people to understand franchising is the job of the Titus Center for Franchising at Palm Beach Atlantic University. We start our 7th year. We have about 70 students studying franchising, but we have a 100-person advisory board that comes to campus twice a year, partly to mentor our students and to look over our students for future employees. They provide internships. Sometimes our students, our graduates, are buying franchises. 7 of them currently are franchisees, another 2 in the process of going through the FDD and looking at becoming franchisees. I don't have any graduate yet buying a Neighborly brand. We need that to happen, Brian. So
we absolutely do.
Focus on South Florida and
Okay.
figure out how Neighborly can do a program with
Okay.
the Titus Center on our campus, and we'll get that going.
Absolutely. It's a great program. I've actually attended a couple of the conferences before and spoke on some panels. Great school, great students, right? I had an opportunity to network and meet a lot of them during the networking session. And we definitely have to see what we can do from a Neighborly perspective to create.
Maybe you bring Mike Bidwell along with you again. I like that. All right. Well, Brian, I look forward to seeing you, our Selling Franchises Summit. You can be a big hit at that as well. And maybe tell Bidwell you need to be one of the advisors at the Titus Center and come and join us and let our students see more of you and get the benefit of your wisdom about franchising.
I sure will.
Thanks for tuning in to the Franchise Hot Seat Podcast with Dr. John P. Hayes. Tune in next time for more conversation around all things franchising.